Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. I'm Jonathan Hoenig. Welcome to the Ayn Rand Center UK, the Daily Objective, on a very somber, very serious, a very important program today. The Stupid Rebellion. It's a little bit of an objectivist inside joke, if you will. We're playing off Ayn Rand's famous essay called Cashing In the Student Rebellion. That's reprinted in Return of the Primitive. But we're coming to you from the UK, all throughout the world. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers. And we have a really insightful program for you today, a day after really a frightening, unprecedented scene in which tens of thousands of Trump supporters and others stormed the Capitol of the United States in something that really hasn't been seen in this country in hundreds of years, if that, leading to at least 4 deaths and tremendous soul searching, and even calls for the president of the United States to either resign or be removed from office with the 25th Amendment. We have a very insightful panel here to talk about it. Nikos, who now, as I understand, just goes by one name. So he joins, I know, Cher and a few others in history is having that title and that honor. Nikos is an educator, a professor, a counselor here at the Ayn Rand Center UK. Welcome, Nikos. Thank you for being with us. Razi Ginsburg, he is the CEO of the Ayn Rand Center UK, student of objectivism, a scholar and a great activist as well. We'll be sharing his thoughts. And Mark Pellegrino, also an activist, also a student of objectivism. Oh yeah, also a huge actor in Hollywood and a really insightful, a thoughtful guy. So thank you all for being with us today, and thank you to our audience as well. Now the super chat is open. We will get to all of your comments and all of your perspective, but I'll at least kick it off and we'll go around the horn briefly. In that I saw this unfolding yesterday. I guess it was late in the evening in the UK, but here in the United States, it really started early in the morning with the president's address to a rally which he had called, which he had organized. And one thing kind of came to my mind throughout the whole thing, and it was a quote of Dr. Leonard Peikoff, who's, of course, Ayn Rand's intellectual heir, from one of his radio shows going back decades now. I know some of us have listened to these, and his comment was, he was doing a tie-in contest. Basically, Dr. Peikoff's comment was that unreason leads to force. Unreason leads to force. And I realized I had tweeted that even a couple of years ago in response to a question about kind of the Trump campaign, if you will. What I saw yesterday, I'll share my quick POV, was really one of the darkest days I remember in modern American political history. I think, to steal a phrase, it's a day that will live in infamy. And I tallied back to Dr. Peikoff's quote, because without reason, and as objectivists, that's what we're all about. We are all about reason. Without reason, there is only force. There is only fighting. There's 2 ways to deal with people, by reason or with force. And yesterday we saw force, and I thought it was pretty vile. What I saw was a mob, a true deplorables, if you will, with a total disregard for property, for the police, for the country, who, desecrated what I consider to be a pretty holy place. I always enjoy and believe in Dr. Yaron Brooks' comment that government is a necessary good. I do believe in government, and to see that holy place desecrated like this, I just think it is 100% inexcusable. It's indefensible. There's no other word. And to see so many so-called defenders of capitalism, even many so-called objectivists defending this, makes me want to throw up in my mouth. I just don't think there's any justification for this anarchy. In fact, I remember, believe me, no one was condemning Occupy Wall Street more than me. No one's condemned BLM more than me. Many have. But this, in a weird way, was even worse, because this really felt like an attack on the country itself. It was whipped up, in my opinion, by the president. Why? Yes, we're all responsible for our own actions, but why were these people even there? Why were they there in the first place? The president created this situation. He whipped up the situation. I have more to say about it, but I want to invite everyone else in and say that I just think was one of the worst, most ugly things I've seen in my lifetime in American political history. And I tally back to what Dr. Peikoff said. This was an orgy of unreason, and unreason leads to force, as it did in this case. I want to bring in Nikos for your perspective on this
Jonathan.
really troubling issue.
Yeah, so what actually is happening is that now the dark corners of the internet are the real world. We see, for example, something close to the QAnon conspiracy becoming the official, in a way, the official line, people buying into it, people buying into this idea that they're going to storm the Capitol. And it was a big farce, but a farce when there is no reason, as you said, can easily turn to tragedy. So, and that's what we saw. However, I don't want so much to pick this up as a historical moment that in a way came out of the blue, because it did not come out of the blue. So here is some background. So let's go back to 2016, right? So 2016, we had the other side saying that this is not a legitimate election. Some people in the other side calling for not recognizing the results of the election. We had also protests in Washington, if you remember, the day of the inauguration. And we had one of the most prestigious, supposedly, commentators writing in New York Times that something like, we are in the first week of the Putin-Trump regime. So that's the intellectual climate we have been operating for a while. Of course, now it escalated, but it didn't escalate out of the blue. Second point, so during the summer, we had this gaslighting of all of us sitting in front of our screens, and suddenly it was that the virus is not anymore the case, and suddenly it was that this was a mostly peaceful protest. Now, this is not whataboutery, but what I'm saying is that when you completely take away from the public sphere this idea that there are some facts, that there's some reason, it's now one's irrationality versus the other's irrationality. The one's irrationality was saying that, oh, Trump is going to put people in concentration camps or whatever. The other side's irrationality is that there is this conspiracy, communists are taking over, they're stealing the presidency. Now, unfortunately, we have the president of the United States sharing the second irrationality. But again, personally, I don't consider that this is this super dark moment that comes out of the blue. This is the logical next step. I'm not surprised at all with what happened. And one more thing.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, you're making my point, Dr. Peikoff's point. Unreason leads to force. And that's exactly what we saw.
Yeah, and one more point. So these people yesterday probably are going to say that the exact opposite of the left. Interestingly, they have assimilated the most irrational aspects of the last decades from the leftist movements. Let me give you 3 examples. This idea of the leaderless, spontaneous protest. This idea of the carnival protest, that we make a statement. This protest that has no aims, but it is just an emotional outburst, that we are angry and we are showing the world. And this is exactly what we saw yesterday. That's why I'm not buying that this was a coup or a fascist coup or an insurrection or anything like that. These were some people who had no idea what they were doing. And you could see it by the fact that they were in the Capitol and they were taking selfies. And after an hour, they left. So this is emotionalism at its purest. If you want to have a coup, it means you have some aims, you have some ideology, or you have at least a plan for the next hour. These people didn't even have a plan for the next hour. And this is exactly what has been the message all this time, that it's all about your emotions. It's all about your feelings. It doesn't matter what the reality is. You feel like Trump is your president. Therefore, you act as if Trump is still president and the communists took power. So this is a farce that turned into tragedy because people lost their lives. But this is what it is. I want to keep it in a proportion, and I don't want to participate in the narrative that says that, oh, this was like this was not Olympus has fallen. This was the caricature, the tragic caricature of Olympus has fallen.
Razi Ginsburg, what's your perspective on this from the UK?
Yeah, so I agree with much of what Nikos says, certainly about the intellectual climate. And so what I really strongly disagree with Nikos on was his conclusion, and which I think is kind of playing it down. Because the fact that these in no country where a coup was successful were the rioters deeply intellectual. It's the leadership that sends them there, and I agree with the intellectual climate, coming, I think, mostly from the left that, encourages violence. And of course, Trump is very much philosophically aligned with those people. But yeah, we saw this. By the way, Trump, I think in 2016, right, he started saying that if he loses the election, it's because it's rigged and there will be riots. So he's been threatening these riots for 4 years and more than 4 years, and now we're getting them. And the fact that yesterday, that what differentiates, yesterday from things like what Black Lives Matter and Antifa were doing and still are doing, is the fact that people were called to do this by the president. They were called by the president to attack the institutions of the government that he is at the head of. So I do think this is a very, very serious thing. The fact that it didn't end in, hundreds of deaths and, the overthrow of the government doesn't mean that it's not a very bad step, a very big step in a very bad direction. And I think we should take it as that and, try to figure out how, if anything can be salvaged here, because I think this great country is in a very big.
So are you actually worried that there's going to be a coup or something, or that these people are capable of gaining power of the military, getting control of the police? Are we actually saying that this is what you saw yesterday, a force capable of taking power even within 10 years?
We saw a step in that direction, and we see that with BLM and Antifa. So we see the
who's more successful?
What?
Who's more successful? Not to play devil's advocate. Look, I feel like Rip Van Winkle. I was in surgery yesterday, and I was in a anesthetic-induced coma. So gratefully, this whole thing passed over me. But I would say, to Nikos's question, is this coup going to happen? I would say, between the sides, between the Proud Boys and BLM, who has more power and cultural influence? Who has the purchase in the political community? Who basically determines the discourse?
What are the fundamental differences?
Can I just say two different sides of the same coin, as Nikos pointed out? So it's the same unreason. So
but what side has political? Which side has political purchase? Which side is being taught in academia? Which side is being taught in grade 1
is the
through
nuclear
12?
codes, Mark. I'm just going to say one of them, the one who was encouraging yesterday's riot, happens to have the nuclear codes.
Indeed.
He's got a little political power
but
too.
we've seen the same hyperbole, the same delusions in the punditry, in Congress, people that were encouraging violence against the other side. You're right. What we see is two sides of the same freaking irrational coin. And now emotionalism is the tool everybody uses to measure whether or not something is right or wrong. And so now when people aren't getting their way, they're stomping around like spoiled children. The left did it for 4 years, and they held entire cities hostage for days and days and days and days. Certainly the president of the United States, as the one politician who's supposed to appeal to all the states and to everybody and have universal appeal, should not be the main demagogue on the stump doing the nonsense that Maxine Waters and some of these other Schiff and all these other idiots engaged in. But what I see is a political climate of tribes who are distinguishing themselves by non-essentials. Their preferences are what they're trying to force on each other and on the rest of us. And I see one side as being culturally dominant and the other side as being reactive to the cultural dominance, to be honest with you.
One point to elaborate on what Mark said. So just remember, what was the reaction of everything that determines the ideology in a country in the summer riots, and what was the reaction today? The reaction today was that the conservatives themselves are now rushing to try to impeach Trump or whatever the 25th Amendment means. So they're afraid
they're not.
their own shadow. Give me a second. They're doing this rightly, maybe, right? But the important thing is that it's happening. They're so afraid of what happened yesterday that they are rushing to throw Trump under the bus. The same people that yesterday were saying that the election was stolen. And by the way, which is a narrative that 45% of, actually no, the vast majority of their party agrees in terms of their base. But this shows who has the cultural capital in this one. So in the summer, you saw the parts of the political class kneeling and supporting. Now you see rushing to denounce. So this shows that yesterday, these are condemnable, ridiculous, bad, evil, whatever you want to call it, they're not a danger because they have zero power. They have zero.
Zero.
But can I just jump in here for 1 second? Nikos, you grew up in Greece, where like street violence is pretty common, graffiti all over the place, strikes that tie up traffic. There's kind of that mass violence. I mean, that's pretty common here. That's uncommon in the United States. But I agree with you what you said about this notion of tribalism, and I think why we need to steer away from it. In fact, Mark Witkins, who's an objectivist, shared this on Twitter. Let's not, and I agree with it. Let's not look at this through a tribal lens. Let's not look at this as, so-called the left versus the right. I mean, this was that same sort of appeal to emotionalism, Mark. I think that I hear you talking about that should be so abhorrent to any objectivist who deals with others through reason, not through physical force. And, if you're ready for an armed confrontation, you should really be ready to win. But I don't see, Nikos, a lot of people on the so-called right throwing the president under the bus, although they should be. This was one of the most ugly scenes I've ever seen in American history, at least in my lifetime, and should be condemned by everyone on every aisle, especially objectivists.
You're right.
I can name you at least 10 war scenes, but that's not the point. But anyway, sorry, Mark.
No, I think what you do see now is proper reporting of what's happening, a proper condemnation almost universally in the media, which should have been happening throughout Portland, which should have been happening throughout CHOP, which should have been happening throughout all the BLM and Antifa protests. Every time they came about, that kind of violence should have been roundly condemned. And now it is. And that, as Nikos says, shows you which ideology is the captain of the ship. I mean, BLM comes out as a cultural Marxist organization that wants to reshape things. They're using racism as a means to do that, and they've instigated and promoted violence throughout from their inception, and they're getting millions upon millions of dollars. They are being inserted in corporate America. One of the co-founders has just been hired onto Warner Brothers to command content. I mean, do you see that same thing happening with fringy groups like the Proud Boys? No, everybody hates them because they're just these reactionary racists that nobody takes seriously, but they're taking the reactionary racists on the other side seriously. 1619 is now going to be curriculum. Who has the power? I know Leonard says, look, the left is disorganized, they're disintegrated, they're that in the dim perspective, they're too disintegrated to actually matter, and the right. Well,
can I throw back to you, Mark?
And that's scary. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I agree with you. The so-called left has the cultural momentum it sees, but what's so frightening about the scene yesterday is who is the opposition? I think that's the point. Is who's the opposition? They're worse. They're more disgusting. They're more vile. I mean, I was part of the Tea Party. I spoke at the first Chicago Tea Party in the early days when it was about smaller government, get your hand out of my wallet, ever that. I mean, back in 2008, there was an actual individualist perspective, an individualist voice on the scene. So who is the opposition to the radical left now? The radical right, which carries the bag of so-called capitalism. They carry the flag of capitalism, saying they're the defenders of capitalism. They don't know what.
Yeah, they don't tread on me flags. Yeah, there were some don't tread on me flags. Yeah,
but I think the cats are out of the bag. They don't even hype that anymore. Now they're openly calling for nationalism and traditionalism. They're openly enemies of the Enlightenment. They're openly enemies of individualism now. So we have on both sides open enemies of individualism. If I can make an appeal to whomever is watching this show to just get the fuck away from both sides.
Yes.
And come over to the light. Come to the light, my friends. Individualism and objectivism is the light. Come here. I encourage you.
Can I give a hypothesis about the future and you tell me if you people agree? So why I think that yesterday could be a catalyst for good. So Trumpism is delegitimized in a way in one day more than it had in 4 years in the eyes of many. So that's not bad. There is no Trumpism without Trump, in my opinion. And I would even say there is no GOP the way we know it without Trump, because there is no energy in GOP without Trump. And we will see this, I think, in 2 years and in 2024. So what is happening now is, for the first time, or whatever is the left, the other side, the field is open, right? There is in a way historical justice being done there. Everyone is showing their face. And don't expect that the solution is going to be a nice shoot from a Washington think tank, because what the experience of last 4 years has shown is that this model is out of the window. So the field is open. Are we brave enough to say we can intervene in this climate and try to impose our narrative, or at least gain 1% of the pie of the narrative? Because this idea that perpetually that things would never change and would be this kind of balance, this is the past. It might be sad that it is over, or it might be a good thing that it is over. The question is, are we ready to recognize the new reality? So that's why I say don't stick so much to what happened yesterday. See what's going to happen, see what's going to come out of yesterday for the GOP or for this whole milieu.
Yeah,
I have to just joke a little bit about an objectivist talking about the new reality. I thought reality was what it is. I didn't know there could be a new reality. I just thought it existed, it was.
I love it when Nikos is optimistic, so I'm going to take it, even if it comes in a new reality package, because it's so rare. But this is one of those occasions where I have to be the pessimist. I don't see how you can look at something bad and say, okay, maybe good will come out of it. Where is that good going to come from? Objectivism is not dominant enough in the culture that if people see two bad sides that are essentially the same, they're going to think, okay, the alternative is objectivism. No, the alternatives are, different variations on the same theme. And this is, again, back to the comparison with what happened with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And by the way, yeah, the condemnations. So I see world leaders, from around the world condemning what happened yesterday. That's not a condemnation of violence. That's, in a sense, an endorsement of violence, because we've seen this same type of violence, but worse, in America months ago, and there was no condemnation of it. There was support for the cause and maybe disagreement with the tactics. Now, again, I do think yesterday was special in the sense that it was an attack on an institution of government incited by the president. So it's unique in its history historically, but no, both sides are in agreement. By the way, both sides are in agreement on loads of policy issues as well. But they're also in agreement on the best tactic to get things moving, which is violence. So no, I don't see what alternative.
I do. I'm so. Go ahead, John.
Please, Mark. Please go ahead.
I disagree with you, Razi. I'm in Nikos's camp here. I think that when Trump was elected, I predicted in an article for the Atlantic that it would be the end of the Republican Party. I'm sort of happy that seems to be the case right now. The conservatives in general have been sort of an ad hoc, philosophy. They've taken from a lot of different disparate sort of things, cobbled together what they think is a political philosophy, but really isn't. And so they got a strong man to fill in for the vacuum of their political philosophy. So now the right is a movement in search of a philosophy. The left has their philosophy. It's called theory. It's called critical race theory. It's called postmodernism. They have that. So now I think that this giant sucking sound you're hearing as Trump goes down the drain with the Republican Party, the smarter elements of the party are going to start looking for something solid to grip onto. And I think we can steer them in the direction of individual rights, individualism, rational egoism. I think we have the cultural upper hand, even though we're sort of on the fringes of the culture.
I hope that's the case, Mark. I mean, when you Google American businessman, you will be shocked, as I am, as I'm sharing now, that Donald Trump is the first image that comes up. And,
wow,
that's
sick.
Friggin' horrifying. That is sick. And, I took a lot of flack. In fact, I was on a Fox News show for 14 years, up until the time that I said that I thought, in fact, I was supporting Hillary over Trump. I wrote a column that got reprinted by Reason and others because of that. I think what's so damaging long-term is that just as in the 2008 financial crisis, the history was written that it was capitalism and free markets that caused the crash. Donald Trump, and this is why I was really against him from the start, is synonymous with being a businessman, with being a so-called capitalist, with Americanism as Ayn Rand understood it, but Trump supporters do not. And that's why, unfortunately, I kind of err on the side. I think I'm more on Razi's side here of just real despondence about that scene yesterday, that this is Donald Trump, the businessman, the American businessman's legacy, an armed insurgence of the Capitol with blood on the in Congress. It's an absolute disgrace. And I don't want to see objectivism get kind of saddled with that. Oh, individualism. Oh, selfishness. Oh, business. That's really what to blame here. And that's my fear.
That's already happening. It's certainly already happening. That's the straw man that people like to attack with respect to objectivism. But we're changing that. And I think.
And as the gentleman said, who is in Mark's t-shirt, we'll just have to work a bit harder.
Yes, I'm wearing a Reardon Steel t-shirt.
Well, and I want to take a brief moment to thank our Super Chat supporters. Daniel, thank you for the Super Chat. LMH, thank you for the Super Chat. Shona Clements, she says, the light is the place to go. That's your part, Mark. Both sides make my head hurt. Great chat, guys. That's exactly right. And you don't have to choose sides, in my opinion. Live your life. What we say and do ultimately isn't going to change politics, certainly in the short terms. Live and enjoy your life. Discuss these issues. Thank you, Mary Aline, for your generous Super Chat. So we're here to provide you that light and also offer some perspective on some really difficult times and for anyone who loves freedom and liberty.
Oh, and also, guys, check out the AmericanCapitalistParty.com. Do what I did a few days ago when I re-registered for my driver's license. I re-registered myself as the American Capitalist Party. And you can do that too, even though we don't have a formal party setup and nobody running yet. Why not? Just start taking the move. We could be the we could be the grassroots movement that changes everything.
Yeah, don't be afraid of the chaos. Embrace it in a rational way and see it as an opportunity to change. All
Absolutely.
Revolutionaries have always understood this. It's time also for us to understand it.
And I'll make one more quick recommendations if I can, if I have it here. I won't bother looking for it, but Dr. Peikoff's The Ominous Parallels, which talks a lot. I mean, it talks a lot about basically the philosophical situation that led up to Nazi Germany. I think it's extraordinarily pertinent for anyone. Thank you, Razi, for sharing it. A really great book. It was reprinted. It's now also available, I think, called The Cause of Hitler's Germany. It's available on Amazon. Not expensive, really great read from Dr. Peikoff to learn more about a real objectivist perspective on a lot of today's events. So with that, I'll thank all of our viewers, our listeners, our Super Chat donors, and my fellow panelists, Nikos, Mark, Razi. Final words, gentlemen?
I have some final words, but if you
Please.
guys want to go first, go ahead.
I'll just say that the New Ideal actually put something out written by Alain Journo, which is a very interesting assessment of the right and of conservatism. If you want to see where objectivists stand, for the most part, I mean, we all have our little disagreements, but where objectivists stand on what the conservative movement is, check out that article in the New Ideal. I posted it on my Twitter page. And keep fighting the good fight, folks. Reason and egoism.
Absolutely. What about you, Nikos?
Well, my last comment would be, yeah, it sucks, but try to understand what's happening and try to understand how we could use this to save whatever it is to be saved. That's why I'm saying, let's not just be on the side saying, oh, this was horrendous. Yes, it is horrendous. But the question is, what are we going to do about it? That's what I'm more interested in.
Well, that I can agree with. And I want to second Jonathan for thanking all the super chatters. Gullwings also had a super chat at the beginning, so thank you as well.
Thank you.
There is no episode of The Selfish Lovers today. The next one is next Thursday. We will update you on the topic. And what else do we have coming up? Monday. Well, tomorrow there's the Psychology of the Fountainhead Characters, an episode on the supporting characters. It premieres at 10 p.m. UK time, 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific. Monday evening, we have an event, Was Ayn Rand Wrong About a Woman President? We'll have a few people speaking. James Valiant and Harry Binswanger are confirmed So that should be interesting. I hope you all join us for that. And of course, the Daily Objective is back tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Bye.